My name's John Ball. I'm an architect, a PhD student at ASU. And the topic of my dissertation is curatorial architecture in the digital fabrication environment. And by curatorial architecture, I mean taking what's been learned in the arts community about curatorial practice and transferring it to architecture. Because right now in architecture, there is no notion of curatorial. There is the architect and that's it. There's no notion of guiding a group of artists to create an exhibit, and the building is really an exhibit. Right, so everybody knows what this building is. It's the Bauhaus, the second Bauhaus building by Gropius, right? And there's the Bauhaus crowd. So you know how your faculty advisor become psychologists periodically? So I go into my advisor and we sit down and we're talking and he says, "You're obsessed." And I said, "Obsessed? No, I don't like obsessed people." And he says, "No, you are obsessed." And I said, "With what?" And he says, "You are obsessed with changing the Bauhaus. You don't like what they did. You want to rewrite the Bible." And I realized he was right. And so this little project that I've been doing, and everything you're going to see is in the last 2 weeks, it's about rewriting what the people at the Bauhaus did, because I think they made a fundamental mistake. The fundamental mistake was they failed to integrate the arts and architecture through technology, which was the promise of their first manifesto, right? We will integrate the arts and architecture through technology. And they had the best group of artists that you can imagine. They got Kandinsky, they've got Clay, they've got Schlitter, they've got everybody there. They got the best group of artists you could possibly imagine. And look at that building. Where is the art in it? Where is the craftsmanship? Where are all these artisans that were supposed to be integrated into the architecture? Well, they couldn't pull it off. So the next image you're going to see, and I'm using Google SketchUp for this. Google SketchUp is, it's a simple freeware program, but it's one of the basic BIM programs, or building information modeling programs. So when we're talking about the intersection of art and technology, in my little world, building information modeling and digital fabrication is the technology. So SketchUp is one of those. So I'm doing this presentation in SketchUp. So there's the end of that building we were just looking at. And my first thought was, okay, what if the Bauhaus had actually incorporated the work of the artists? They got all these great artists into this building. What would they have done? So I thought, all right, I'm going to paint it on. I'm going to collage it on. And I'm going to try this, but I gave up almost immediately because I know it's not going to work because the grid structure is just too strong. But I'm trying to play with it just a little bit. I'm going to think, okay, I got these forms. I can do something with the forms, but it's really just not going to work. I tried painting on these forms and these buildings, but it's just not going to work. So what I do is I think I'll do the reverse. Instead of trying to put the art of the Bauhaus on the building, what I'm going to do is put the buildings on the art. Because I think that an abstract painting is a lot like a floor plan. They're both just total abstractions. Nobody experiences a building as a floor plan, really, truly. You don't actually experience a building in elevation either. You see it in all these 3 dimensions. And an abstract painting is real similar. So I'm going to try this little scheme where I take a painting. Now, so here's Laszlo Moholy-Nagy, one of the great artists at the Bauhaus, and there's one of his collages. And one of the things you find when you look at the work of the Bauhaus is there people everywhere, and there's human form everywhere. Not on the buildings, not in the true abstractions, but in everything else. In the ballet. Did anybody know there was a Bauhaus ballet? I didn't. There was a Bauhaus theater, there was a Bauhaus ballet, and if you look behind the mainstream works and look deeper into the Bauhaus, there's human form everywhere. The bulk of the work is about human form. The bulk of the architecture is about anti-human form. So I want to take a piece by Laszlo Moholy-Nagy. It's this just simple abstract painting, just some shapes. It's really a neat painting. And I'm going to try to generate some architecture out of this painting. So what I do is I extrude those forms up, and now I've actually got kind of a cool looking building. It's sort of Guggenheimish, right? Has anybody been to the Guggenheim to see the Kandinsky show that's there right now? So that's kind of Guggenheim-y, and all I did, I can go back to that image just right before this, I just took his forms and I extruded them up. Real simple, and so, okay, that sort of looks like buildings actually. That looks like kind of a cool contemporary building, but now what if I try to make it even more of a building? So I take that image of that end of that building that I said I couldn't work with, and I just paint it on to this form that I created from Moholy-Nagy's painting. And so, yeah, that looks okay. It looks like a building, it's starting to do building-like things. You can kind of zoom in on it. You can imagine yourself standing there on the little balcony and all this stuff. That's sort of cool, but still, now when I look at that, I'm saying, oh, this has got all the problems of architectural neutrality. This has got all the problems of stiff, boring, no human content. Because what I think is that the fundamental purpose of a building is to reveal the strength and character of the people and the community in which it was built.
And just as the artwork and ocular instrument may be considered as aids in the interpretation or misinterpretation of a subject, current innovations such as Google Earth are providing updated modes of perceiving and space and of navigating the conceptual spiral. In June of 2005, Google introduced Google Earth, a digital globe interface that I'm sure we're all familiar with now. And so when Google Earth is kind of, can be credited to kind of contributing to placing the viewer in the world at large, as in that people can physically find where they are, where we're sitting right this very moment, and place it within a larger context. However, while it can be seen as creating stability and self-positioning for the located but distant observer, it also has the potential for disorientation, reflecting Heidegger's suggestion that the essence of modern technology is the total availability of being placed and displaced at will. The ability to zoom in and out on a given position on the Earth's surface can result in a displacement akin to that generated from the expanding and contracting microscope or telescope. And such devices can eliminate the fixed position of the human body at the center. The limits become arbitrary, determined by the capabilities of technology instead of the human eye. Previously, we could think of kind of the limit to the naked human eye as being kind of assisted by the human being in an aircraft or spacecraft physically being transported and zooming in and out. And I kind of look at that as one limit. And then there's the mechanical eye, which where it's kind of enhancing the human eye, like as in the telescope or the microscope. And then there's the sight-non-sight, which I agree was kind of a slightly different thing, and also Google Earth is a slightly different thing, a representation, but not merely a representation. I'll go on without. Thus, although this exploration of a sequence of scales begins with the human body is no longer at that center of the sequence, but is merely somewhere in the middle in this non-space that Smithson talks about. The computer monitor, the network computer monitor, can also be used as an optical device to flatten, transform, and present multiple perspectives. The screen serves as an entrance to the info space of the internet, this new other realm that is existing at the same time as this realm we're in now. A fluid electronic version of space that is a form of the non-sight, but is also something else beyond representation. The frame itself thus separates distinct but coexisting spaces. A physical space of the human body and the virtual space is seen through the screen. David Josselit suggests that virtual devices and applications such as Google Earth enable us to occupy multiple places at once. And they may not refer, these digital spaces may not even refer to material places. And with such a navigable virtual sphere, the user is able to be, as Baudelaire states, to be away from home and yet to feel at home, to behold the world, to be in the midst of the world, and yet to remain hidden from the world. Ledmanovich also compares the internet to the American West, the Wild West, in the idea of exploration, homesteading, and the frontier, and kind of ideas that were also tied to Smithson and Landart in the 60s and 70s, but that's kind of another can of worms. But this whole idea of conquering the uninhabited and exploration is something that Google Earth is really, users of Google Earth have embraced. And so there's this Google Earth sightseeing community, this group of and then can travel to all these different land art sites, including Smithson's other works. And in this, it's reminiscent of, Charles and Ray Ames' Powers of 10, and it's also this context where, users can contribute to their web experience. They can contribute these user-generated tags and content. For example, for this one, this image here that a user uploaded, someone passive that encountered it commented, "Great capture. I love these colors and the subject is unusual to say the least. What is the purpose of the jetty in the spiral form?" And then the photographer responds, gives an explanation of the spiral jetty, and that an original commenter responds, "Thanks for the explanation. This is fascinating. I've never heard of art in this form. I'm going to have to Google this Smithson guy." And so it all kind of comes around. And so Matthew Coolidge of the Center for Land Use Interpretation suggests that this internet-induced sensation of multi-placement and separate yet congruent experiences may be viewed as an extension of Robert Smithson's site, non-site dialectic, and perhaps can be considered a site, non-site, website trialectic. Through these internet-based interfaces such as Google Earth, individuals can explore these scalable systems where you can look for new relationships, juxtapositions, and context based on where and how you're looking. And this is kind of a drawing Smithson did in 1970 that I think kind of illustrates these multiple spheres and layers that are kind of coexisting at once.
Right, and by memory I don't mean, because I don't think this is in any way a preservationist-oriented project where you don't tamper with things. It's more that I feel that there's the capacity to reveal and retain some of the existing built environment, I think lends meaning to the experience, even if I have no association with, say, 19th century textile mills,
I thought it seemed like an interior Highline park. Like what you were doing, you were taking this thing and you're going to kind of let it transform itself, sort of, and then you were also going to do interventions. That was a cool project.
Yeah,
Or is it cool?
Thanks. Yeah. Yeah.
So you're good with surveillance. You're not worried about that. Sensors. You were kind of like on the fence in your presentation on the ethics of sensors. It seemed to me. I think there's a good side, like so there's some sensor telling the building I'm comfortable or not comfortable. That's a good thing. There's a sensor telling the security guy where exactly I am in the building. That's maybe not so good.
Yeah. I think the problem is the architects that have explored it have done it, and it's thus far just been sort of a really interesting gimmick. Like, oh, I can make the lights go on if I do this, or I walk and the lights shift. And that's just, it's more of an aha moment and less meaningful. And I think the challenge, and I don't think I've gotten there at all, and this is what I kind of really wish I could pursue, but architecture school doesn't really allow for this yet, is to find ways to kind of really surpass that. So that isn't just about, how it's being marketed is smart technologies allow us to control the environment before we even get home. So Cisco has a whole system where you can turn on the lights in your apartment before you get there on your phone, like as if just uber control of space is really all we want. And quite the opposite. I almost want it to be the opposite, that you can't control it. You have to be surprised by it, because that's what's kind of missing in that techno fetishizing of sensors, But I think if the sensor could create dialogue between people on two sides of a wall, or an awareness that the climate is changing, and an ability to reverse that to me is more interesting. It's got to be more two-way than it is.
I think you're just mentioning this sort of hyper functionality that promises so much, but doesn't play out the way that we think it should.
Yeah, but I also feel like this is all very new, and we shouldn't abandon the mission yet. 'Cause, again, I look at modernism from a historical perspective that, what, negative or not, the shift from 19th century architecture to 20th century architecture that really changed had a lot to do with material shifts. Glass and steel coming into possibility, But we didn't imagine skyscrapers for decades. The idea of being at the heights that we are now was unimaginable. It had to kind of evolve through experimentation. So I kind of think the same way, these technologies will shape the environment. We have to continue to explore them until we find how they will shape them. I don't think we've really begun the process. So, are there questions? I really want to kind of hear some questioning of the third panelist here, John.
I'm a writer and scholar, maybe in some sense, and I'm very aware that we're at a moment, literally almost this month, where the book is disappearing. I mean, with the number of iPads and Kindles that are being sold, after Christmas, the market for material books is going to be gone. And I wonder if the same kind of thing, in some weird sense, has happened in architecture, that the building has disappeared. I mean, it's still, they're all around us, obviously, but that the space that we actually inhabit is only incidentally these buildings. I'm always disappointed. All this hot new architecture, it'll let you have your coffee ready when you get up in the morning. What a letdown. When really the exciting thing about what's going on is that I can flip on my computer and talk to my granddaughter, who's or see my 18-month-old granddaughter who's 150 miles away. Things like that. And so I wonder if the kind of the material world, this was modernism. This is what we're living in. As much as whatever you think about it, we were here, and it is weirdly kind of irrelevant at this point. Except for the fact that this is it.
Well, back to words for a second, though. So you're a writer, and so paper books, maybe, the market is shifting from physical paper books to electronic books. I think the market for art books, somebody earlier this morning showed a really fantastic art book, the Dobervogen, or whatever her name was. That was a killer art book. So I think the art book section is growing. I think the ebook section is growing. I think the total volume number of words is probably actually growing. So that means that the number of stories that need to be told is actually growing.
But the city is like a library. It's where you've got all these old dead books hanging around.
Yeah. So do you need them on pieces of paper? I don't know. Yeah, I guess not.
Yeah. Or do you need the? Obviously we gotta have spaces to be inside of, but is the building the place where we express our meaning now? Or does architecture simply become like art books? And there are these special things that we charge excessive prices for.
Thinking about it, the building, you think about it in a design sense. How does it function? How does it encourage people to interact with each other or interact with the environment? And then you can think of it in an aesthetic sense, which I think John is doing. What does this building mean? How is the aesthetic qualities of it changing my perceptions of it?
I think one thing to think about is that in the future also, as we have less and less space, there's more renovations occurring, and as we add this technology, if we find that a building that was built in a more bland, modernist sense previously, can we now add meaning to it that is more localized through digital fabrication or whatever it is, that takes a building that maybe used to reflect nothing and now reflects a very small culture or small local setting.
I thought was interesting about that is that in the, I guess Adolf Loos wrote Ornament and Crime in 1908, suggesting that we needed to strip away ornament because it had become devoid of meaning altogether, and it was just decoration, and it was, he referred to it as the equivalent of tattoo, it's criminal behavior, and now we're sort of seem to be so lacking in I think a kind of a connection almost to the sort of ritual meaning of place, that the desire to re-ornament buildings is emerging, and I wondered if that was what motivated your interest in this.
Well, when you walk around town here and you look at historic buildings, let's say, and you look at the ornament, it's all stuff from catalogs. Even in St. Paul's Cathedral, I was there last night, there's ornament on the walls, it was out of catalogs. And that whole system of ornament in the late 1800s, late 1900s, early 20th century was catalog ornament. Except for Sullivan and a few people, they were just buying forms from terracotta companies for the most part, sometimes cast concrete companies. So yeah, it had lost meaning because it was just, you're just buying it out of a catalog. That's also the problem with contemporary architecture. You're just buying the sheetrock and the track lights and the window system out of a catalog. There's nothing human about it. There's no modification of it. There's no, artisanal aspect to it.
So it's the artisanal that you're particularly kind of
Yeah, I
keeping
think about it, calling it curatorial architecture sometimes. Sometimes I think of it as artisanal architecture, which sounds like you're bringing it down a notch, but maybe that is what I'm trying to do, is bring it down a notch. But with the high and mighty architecture, just bring it down, let real people contribute to the building, let real people add content to the building. And in fact, here's what I want, is the building to tell a story. Because I've got this really old school thing in the back of my mind, that it's Philip Johnson who said, some civilizations are known mostly by their buildings, some only by their buildings. Whether that really goes on. So 3,000 years from now, what are they going to think of this society? When you dig this up 3,000 years from now, they're going to say this was the Dark Ages. They're going to dig up some contemporary buildings and they're going to say there was no artistic content whatsoever. They're made out of the cheapest possible materials you can imagine. And they're going to say there was no literacy, there was no talent on this planet during the 20th century. And that's because that's what the buildings are going to say to them. It's like so I'm sorry. I really believe that.
I'm gonna suggest this, that you took on Bauhaus, that the neutrality of their buildings is kind of a problem for you, correct? Yes. Hang on. But I think that
development in the Bauhaus, as I understand it. Go ahead.
well, they didn't. Yeah, actually, the first 8 years they didn't have an architecture school. But for me, I think what they were trying to do is they were actually trying to liberate. They thought they were actually doing some service for the community in the fact that they were removing the weight of history. Just coming out of the Great War, they were kind of trying to reduce the influence of the church or the obvious power of the state. So that's what that neutrality is. It's supposed to be a liberating force.
Yeah, but I thought, excuse me, it's also a symbol for the mass ornament, Krakauer. You know the theory of Krakauer, mass ornament, a symbol for society, and when society became constructed in masses and work power and not as individual anymore.
Like precursor of fascism, yes?
Yes, I think, it comes together with architecture also. That was reminding me, because as you said, that there are no individual ornaments in architecture. And for me, it's an interesting parallel line.
Well, first of all, I love modernism, and I love the Bauhaus. And I would live in one in a second, and they're beautiful. They're totally beautiful, but they're beautiful just like the high you get when you take heroin is beautiful. Everything goes away. It's just this peaceful world. It's the social side of after effects that are the problem. There's a great book called The Architecture of Fear about how architecture is destroying the urban environment. It's destroying city life. It's destroying, people getting together. And I don't know if I'm once again running amok, but I truly love modernism, and I just think we need to go beyond it. We're stuck in this thing, and nobody's willing to change it. Everybody's too afraid. Postmodernism was so bad. And the reason was you cannot have an architect provide that ornament. You just can't. Architects have this very limited ability. Architects are bookbinders. All the artisans put the words in the book, but the architect is just a bookbinder. You have to let more people into the process. You have to let the local community into the process.
Did I hear you use the word crowdsource at one point? Crowdsource architecture?
Well, no, but I like that. I want to do. Have you seen the virtual choir, the Eric Whitaker's TED talk called Virtual Choir, TEDx talk, whatever it is? So he posts a score on the internet, and he posts him conducting in silence. And then he has choristers, sopranos and altos and basses and tenors, submit via YouTube their part. And he gets 2,000 parts to this song, and he assembles them all And it is the most, it'll make you cry.
Yeah, but it's not the individual's creativity, they're just performing a role that's descriptive.
That is, so a soprano is just like the person who designs a door pull. A bass is just like the person.
Less so, because they're
Not
just reading a
just-
script.
Pardon me?
They're just reading a script.
But they're interpreting it.
they're
I mean, why go to music school if all you got to do is, play the thing? You've got to learn how to interpret it. So they're interpreting it. So there needs to be a so the score is just the story. They are interpreting that story and doing it their way, with their vocalization, with their intonation, with their
If there's
pace.
2,000 of them, does their individuality actually come across? If you're hearing all 2,000 at once.
You have to watch this thing. You will cry when you watch it. It is totally amazing. Eric Whitaker, the virtual chorus.
Okay.
It's totally amazing, and it's really an analogy for what I think ought to happen in architecture.
What's interesting is I think your talk was had some of you BIM, building information modeling, which and the whole promise of BIM is that the design of buildings will become more collaborative. Building information modeling allows you as a designer to create the skeleton parts of it of the design, but then to have collaborators contribute. So the mechanical engineer will take and contribute to the digital model as it's being built. And in this way, perhaps we kind of open up, and the technology allows that to happen. I haven't seen that that's happening really.
Well, it's kind of
but,
happening.
you know,
I think of a building design as a wiki page. All right, somebody sets up the page. That's the architect, and then there's all these people contributing freely to that page, and it gets edited and it gets nudged, and people complain, whatever, and they nudge it, and then ultimately you've got this great page. When what's his name started Wiki, everybody thought he was crazy, and now it's the dominant encyclopedia by far. It's the dominant mode of collecting information about almost anything. I truly think that architecture is going to go this way.
What's really interesting about how you're proposing that though is that it goes back to exactly what Laura was saying, is that wiki page almost becomes the non-space though, not the building, which is interesting because you have to wonder like how you could in theory just keep revising the building and adding things to it in perpetuity in the wiki page, and yet the building might be done one day, but the wiki page keeps going. You know what I mean? So there's that non-space.
Unless you
spatial-
do what both were suggesting, and that there's an interactivity about it. That the building is responding to people or can respond to the updates of the wiki page, which would be actually sort of feasible in a self-replicating sort of building model, where that's a whole nother three.
And I do think that's kind of where what we have in common to some degree is that that anxiety about. I think architecture does have that problem right now. That virtual architecture is almost overpowering architecture that's getting built. And you see that in school all the time. Students can create so many images of things that they have no capacity to even bring about or ever will. And that's how they judge themselves, is based on the virtualization of architecture. But there's also this real potential of all those technologies to create much more rich, real architecture. But that's a lot harder to do, and we have to kind of keep pushing that has to be the standard that we're sort of going to, is experimenting with interactive architecture or architecture that varies over time in a way that is anticipated. I think those are really interesting ideas that have relevance to the world we live in and the economy we live in. It would be really interesting to see.
One thing I wanted to ask Aurora, so she's read all this stuff about the primacy of sight and all this business, and that our society is so dominated by sight as opposed to hearing or touch or what are the others, smell, that are you worried about that? And because personally I am, and I think, so are you? Especially with regard to architecture. I mean, isn't there something more than just looking at it? Isn't there?
That is, I feel like why, when you mentioned before, there's, if I was afraid, that, people were just going to experience these places digitally and in these other realms instead of the bodily experience. And I don't think it will go away because there is this smell, and you can't, maybe you can later, but I think there's still much to be gained from going to the physical site. And I don't think these digital things are mere replication.